Hello everyone, it's Kimberly Cooper, and I would like to get started with part two for the oral presentation for the older adult interview. The person that I chose to interview is someone who is a family friend. She would like to be referred to as M.A. Williams or Miss Williams. Throughout the presentation, you'll most likely hear me say Miss Williams because that's what I'm used to calling her. Miss Williams is a 64-year-old woman. She's a mother to three adult children and she has six grandchildren. Okay, so to get started, I would like to discuss the developmental stage. Erickson's psychosocial development stage that I chose was stage 6, the intimacy versus isolation, which is the young adulthood. I chose this stage because this was a time in the life of Miss Williams that was very significant, her young adulthood, and she went into discussion a lot about her young adulthood. She really went into depth, and it was a time in her life in which it just really changed her life. She went through a lot of challenges, so that's why I chose the young adulthood. Usually within that stage, that the age range for that is 18 to 40, and it's a stage in which young adults are looking for intimacy and closeness within their relationship. Okay, so when it comes to young adulthood, to give you some insight pertaining to Miss Williams. Miss Williams shared with me that she met a gentleman at the age of 18 and that she fell in love. They first started out as friends, but then friends went into a relationship. He became a boyfriend of hers. They were in a loving relationship, young adulthood. She shared that she loved him, that she was seeking intimacy, that she felt that he was her soulmate. Within that relationship, at the age of 21, she became pregnant and she gave birth to her first child. At the age of 23, Miss Williams got married to this gentleman, and within the marriage, within her time of marriage, within her young adulthood, she had three daughters. Okay, so to talk about some challenges within young adulthood for Miss Williams, Miss Williams shared with me that she went through an abusive relationship. She was in an abusive relationship within her marriage, and she went through verbal and physical abuse from her husband. Also, she had the challenge of employment and also the challenge of poverty. Some accomplishments that Miss Williams gained within this stage was the fact that she was able to successfully raise her three children to become adults, home ownership, and also that she received stable employment. Next, I want to discuss some events in Miss Williams' life that inhibited her resolution of her psychosocial crisis. And some of the events that she went through were race, gender, and social class. Miss Williams, she shared with me that as a young African American woman, with the time that she was growing up, that it was difficult for her. It wasn't very difficult, but it still was a time in which it was difficult for um, young African American women to find work, especially with her only having a high school diploma. She went through the experience of trying to find employment. The employment that she did find was employment that was limited in terms of pay. She shared that often she had to take on jobs of cleaning, housekeeping, doing janitorial work, housekeeping, or like child care, or as far as like I think she said that she was a nanny. Those were jobs that didn't really pay too much. She shared that she often had to take on two jobs at a time. Her husband wasn't really too involved in the family, and he wasn't really contributing to the family due to the fact that he had a dependency of alcohol. So he was there or he wasn't there, and that's what caused it for her to be difficult, because she pretty much had to take on the maintenance of the home and paying the bills herself. In terms of social class, she didn't have enough money. She considered herself to be poor. She didn't live in a very good neighborhood. She did go through poverty in terms, of the food. She had to often visit food banks. She had to also visit thrift stores in order to get clothing for herself and for her children. Within employment, Miss Williams shared that particularly when with working, and if she had the jobs within a factory, that she went through the wage gap with her male counterparts. Okay, talking about the developmental stage 6, that's a stage for young adults in which they learn to give and take with their significant others without sacrificing their identities. Well, Miss Williams shared that within her young adulthood, she did have to she actually, in terms of sacrificing her identity, through the abuse, the verbal and physical abuse, she did feel as though she sacrificed her identity, because through the abuse she developed depression. She did not have any self-worth, and she shared with me that within the time of her young adulthood, the time that she stayed within her marriage, that she totally, because of the abuse, that she lost her identity. Okay, next, talking about, again, as far as with psychosocial crisis resolution, again, in the young adult stage for Miss Williams, which was the abuse was just very significant. It was very challenging for her, and she suffered through cruelty and prolonged cruelty and treatment from her husband, in which she felt as though she was oppressed, that she was in an oppressive state. Miss Williams shared that she was alone, that she felt like she was alone, and she felt like she didn't receive support from her family, from her friends, or from the community. So, as Miss Williams shared, she said that without a doubt she was oppressed from her abusive husband. When it comes to multi-systems, within the life of Miss Williams, she had some factors that facilitated resolution for her psychosocial crisis. This was a time for Miss Williams. This was a turning point for her. She shared that as a young adult, this was a turning point for her. A job that she was working at, a job within a factory. The job was stable. She considered it to be stable. She said that the pay was pretty good, allowed for her to be able to manage taking care of her family and maintaining the bills and the expenses. And within that time, it was a turning point because she became friends with a coworker, someone who was older, someone who acted as a older sister. This person was someone who provided support to her. So this was someone within her life that she did talk to, and through conversation and opening up and sharing with this lady, with this coworker, she found out that the coworker, she also suffered through an abusive relationship in which she was able to get out of it. And this coworker linked her up to an agency, and she received support and counseling from this agency. Also, she received help from this agency with getting involved in a housing program. And Ms. Williams shared with me that after a year of receiving support from this agency, that she gained the courage to leave her abusive husband. Miss Williams, I think she said that she was at the age of 29, so I think she stayed within the marriage for like about 6 or 7 years, but she did gain the courage to leave her abusive husband. So in fact, in terms of multi-systems, those were some multi-systems that facilitated resolution for the crisis for Miss Williams. I would like to discuss an additional theory. An additional theory that I would like to discuss for Miss Williams would be the Banderas modeling. The reason why I chose this theory was because this was a theory in which Miss Williams shared with me that she learned modeling from her mother. Her father had passed away when she was young, so all throughout her childhood and teenage years, she saw her mother being abused. Her mother accepted it, and through explanation, her mother always said that it was the fact that that she felt like women should be submissive to their to males in their relationships, and her mother always faulted herself, put the blame on herself as to why she was being abused. So the reason why I chose Banderas modeling is because Miss Williams did share with me that through childhood this was something that she always saw. So in return, in her young adulthood, she was modeling what she saw within her childhood and teenage years from her mother. Okay. Theory limitations. So when it comes to the theory limitations for Miss Williams, I was able to discuss the Erikson's psychosocial development stages. I was able to discuss the stages. I was able to explain to Miss Williams about the stages. And when it comes to theories of limitation, myself and also Miss Williams, we felt like, Miss Williams felt like she did move through Erikson's stages of development, but she felt like once when she hit the teenage years, the adolescence, that it kind of stopped there for her, and that she wasn't able to successfully move through stage 5 6 and through 5 and 6. I mean, she's now in the adulthood stage, which